On today's Ask Zach Strap In, we're going to talk about one of the banes of my existence, Fender F tuners. We're going to talk about why Fender switched from using Kluson machine heads, why they started using these damn things, and we're going to talk about the variations that Fender used through the years and what to do if you have one of these guitars and you need to replace one of the tuners. Well, hello friends and welcome to Ask Zach. Yes, we're going to talk about Fender F tuners, and that's because they've been kind of the bane of my existence at times. I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I'm going to tell a story about my frustrations with them and just the history, why Fender did it, why they switched from Klusons, and what you can do if you have one of these guitars that has F tuners, whether it be version 1 made in the 60s and up to mid 70s, or version 2 that was made in the later 70s, or even a reissue guitar that has modern F tuners on it. All right, first quick pause for the cause. I need to thank my Patreon members because they are what keeps this channel going, and if you want to join them in supporting the show, check the link in the description. Also, thanks to everyone that's commented on a video or given me a thumbs up or just supported the channel in any way, shape, or form, shared it with others. I appreciate it. Thank you. Let's dive in. So let's look at a set of Kluson machine heads first to kind of show where we're starting from. So Fender, of course, started off using Kluson machine heads because of Paul Bigsby and because what he had done on the Merle Travis guitar in the late 1940s. And so he did the same thing where he would take two sets of, 3 on a side tuners, and he would grind down some of the ends and make a set that would all fit together. And I'm sure he was able to spec something with Kluson at some point. But this is kind of a makeshift kind of thing. It was not perfect. But Fender continued to use that, and the market continued to change and continued to grow because of things like Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show, or Chet Atkins, or the Ventures here in the US, or the Shadows over in the UK, where everyone wanted to learn Apache or Walk Don't Run, and the guitar and the guitar group started becoming more and more popular, and things really hit kind of a boiling point in 1964 with the Beatles appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show. At that point, everyone and their dog wanted to play guitar, and they wanted for people to be screaming for them. So what does that mean? Well, it means that every guitar manufacturer had to triple or quadruple their output. So Fender, Gibson, Gretsch, Rickenbacker, Martin, everyone, Dan Electro, Silver, whoever it was, they had to really up their output, which means you need more pots and capacitors and wire and tuners. And guess who was making the tuners that were being used on most everyone's guitars? Kluson. So all of a sudden, Kluson's making more tuners than they ever have before. And the Fender guys start getting a little nervous. Forrest White, who's the, who's kind of running the factory, he's very concerned about, you need to have multiple suppliers for any item, and they've been solely, counting on Kluson. And I don't know if they actually had an issue or whether this was just something that they felt like they needed to do to protect themselves. And so Fender decided to make their own tuners. So they decided in doing that they wanted to fix a problem that they had dealt with all that time. And that's the fact that Klusons are actually, a set of Klusons is actually 3 different types of tuners. So if you look, you have the kind that's on the right, the kind that's on the left, and the 4 that are in the center. So there's 3 different models. Maybe you're ordering them as a set, But if you have any kind of warranty issue, you have to find out, okay, is it the one on the right end, the left end, or one of the center ones? So that's a problem. So they decided to do one better. Said, let's make them all the same. So that's what they did. So here you can see all 6 tuners are identical. They all mount, instead of mounting in the center edge, having a screw there, they have them catty corner from each other. And so every tuner is identical. There's no difference between the right or the left or the center ones. They're all the same. Also, another thing with Klusons is they weren't really super serviceable. And so Fender decided to make theirs where it would kind of come apart, and they could, if they wanted to, you could, get to the gear and the worm and all those things easier. So this is an F tuner taken apart. So here, of course, is the back cover that we're all familiar with that has the stylized Fender stamp. Here is the the gear, and of course on the other end it has the shaft that you put the end of the string down, and then you have the button that has the of course the worm on it, and it's a little different shaped than a Kluson end. You can see that they more of the octagonal, so as opposed to just a smooth on the Kluson. And the last piece is this little guy here that kind of holds it all together. So they made it where the tuner itself was that all 6 of them were identical, and it was a little more serviceable, and also I guess so it was easier to assemble too. And you start seeing these on guitars in 1966. And sometimes, some of it's on like lower line models, and instead of the a metal head, they have a white plastic tuner button on them. And then you see, of course, the chromed ones that are on like Jaguars and Jazzmasters early on in 66. The big transition comes in 1967. So that's when they really shift over to the F tuners. And of course, 67 is just a huge transition year. So that's when you get this shift from black panels on the amplifiers to silver panels with the drip edge. You get the shift from the transition logo to the black CBS-era logo that was easier to see on television. And you get, of course, Klusons to F tuners. Now, it wasn't just some kind of, like on this date, everything happened and it switched over. So you can see guitars that have the CBS logo and can still have Klusons on there. And then you'll see guitars that have a transition logo but yet have F tuners on them. However, the shift by late 67, the shift is kind of done. There are anomalies. So every once in a while, you will see a guitar made in 68 that has Klusons on it. Now this is exceptionally rare. I have one here. So, and this is the latest one I've seen. So if you have one that's later than this, please show me a picture. But this is December of 1968, which you can see on the heel, which means that, that's when the neck was made or stamped. And so this was really a 69 guitar, but it's still maple cap. It's got a poly finish on it, pure poly. Of course, the black CBS logo and Kluson machine heads. And it has never been drilled out. I've removed these to make sure, and there are no other drill holes. Nothing's been filled. And so this does happen, but it's not common. So, there's always that trite old saying that Fender just used what was lying around. Well, maybe, but, it's still kind of an odd thing. And maybe this was an employee guitar or something where they bought it without tuners and they put their own tuners on it or something. I don't know. Or maybe maybe they were low on tuners and they scraped these out of someplace or took them off a worn, guitar that was there to be repaired or something. But, anyway, This does happen, but it is pretty rare. So these new F tuners that Fender's using are not terrible, and they kind of vary. So they can vary in the height of the shaft holding the tuner button. So if you look on this guitar, if you go across here, this one's a lot taller than the one next to it. And that's because on this guitar, this tuner had a bent button. And so I bought another F tuner, and guess what? It was taller. So Fender kind of played with the specs on these. So I've seen them where the shaft is actually, some can be shorter and taller, and the tuner shaft, and then where the button shaft can also be taller or shorter. So so they kind of played with that. So these are the tuners you mainly see on guitars, again from mid 67 through about 1975. And it's in 75 that Fender decides we don't want to make tuners anymore. And they have Schaller make them. And they look exactly like these from the outside, but they're not the same. So first off, they're not open gear, where if you take the back cover off, you see the gear. These are, they look like a regular F tuner, except here's what you have exposed. One, it has a collar. So the F tuner, the older F tuner, like a Kluson machine head, because that's the thing, the F tuners fit, the original F tuners fit the exact same way as Kluson machine heads, except of course the mounting screws were diagonal from each other. This, they have to change the way they're installing the tuner, because more wood has to be removed so that this collar can fit in the back of the headstock. Also, this is a sealed tuner where you can't get to the worm and the gear. And of course, original ones will say made in West Germany on there. And they were made by Schaller. So that's what Fender uses until about 1981, when they really start shifting the looks of the guitars, and a lot of it has to do with the move toward the vintage reissues. So the vintage reissues, of course, get Kluson type machine heads made by Goto, not Kluson, and everything starts shifting to the smaller, kind of pre-CBS headstock, and you start seeing the logos change, which, of course, you have the Smith-era Strat that still has kind of a CBS kind of looking logo, but then you have the switch to what looks like a modern transition logo on the standard, which later becomes called the American Standard and such. And you also get the use of Schaller fully die-cast machine heads that are, that have the full Fender name on the back of the tuner. So that's the death of the original F tuners. So you have version 1 made by Fender till about 1975, and then you have version 2 made by Schaller up until about 1981. Well, then magically Fender starts making reissue guitars originally it's Fender Japan. They start making reissues of the Paisley and Blue Floral and the 72 Thin Line, and like the Telecaster Custom with the humbucker in the neck. And at first they use Kluson machine heads, but then somehow they get the bright idea to remake the F tuners, and because they want it to look right, and that is part of the look, the F tuners, the buttons, and of course the back of the tuner with the F on it. Well, unfortunately, they don't choose to copy the tuners that would have been on those actual guitars, which would have been version 1. Instead, they decide to make version 2. And so you end up with a modern copy of the Schaller type machine head with the collar on it. And they end up being made in a couple of different countries. I think they're made in Indonesia now, and they're fine. The problem is that there's just not a lot of variations. It's kind of like, if you have one of these tuners, you just have to get another one of these sets from Fender. That's it. There's no other real options. Now, I think Schaller may make one that doesn't have the F on it, and then Kluson makes one that's part of their Revolution series, which is a heavy die-cast tuner, but it has those same, opposite corner install. It has a much heavier button and a larger shaft, and then it has the collar, and this is actually a locking tuner. So that's another option for your modern F tuner replacements. It doesn't really look right, but it's good functionally, and they work well for that. So let's talk about what happened to me and why I'm so upset about the whole thing, or not really upset, but so back 23 years ago, when I was working for Brad Paisley as his first guitar tech, the high E tuner on his 68 Paisley got really wonky. It was actually really loose, and I knew that needed to be replaced. So what did I do? I got online, I saw some F tuners, and I ordered them, from Musician's Friend or Sweetwater, whoever it was. They showed up, and they didn't fit because of the collar, because that 68 Paisley has Type 1 F tuners. And I had a Type 2 reissue tuner, so it would not fit. So I had to contact Bill Crook and Joe Glazer, and they were able to find me an original one, and that worked, and I was able to put it on the guitar, and we were fine. But from then on, I knew, and part of this is I want y'all to know that if you have a Type 1 F tuner, so any from 1966 through 1975, there are no replacements available. None. Did you hear me? None. So if you have one of these guitars and you want it to remain all original, you have to buy a vintage tuner, which is a crapshoot, because some of those sets were removed because they were fine, and some of them were removed because the tuners were worn out. So sometimes you can buy a single tuner for 50 to 80 bucks, and it's a piece of crap. And so I highly recommend that if you do buy a single F tuner, that you have them at least take a picture of the gear and the worm, so you can at least see if it's, remotely clean and sharp looking. Yeah, that's it. That's all you can do. The only other option is you could drill it out for, the Type 2, which I don't recommend. Or you can do what some people did for a while in kind of the 80s and 90s and such. This is less common today, but so here's another, 68. This is a 68 neck on a newer, kind of part body. I can't, yeah, it's nice Lake Placid blue. It's a good looking guitar, but this is a vintage neck. So here you can see that they put Kluson reissue tuners on there. Why'd they do it? Well, because you couldn't get F tuners, and maybe this was early on, before the internet, and they just couldn't find a set. So unfortunately, you do have to drill extra holes. You don't have to take more wood out of the guitar, but you do have to, drill holes for the tuner mounting screws. And then you can see the original holes that were catty corner or diagonal from each other, there on the low E string tuner and here on the high E string tuner. So what do you do if you have a Type 1 F tuner? Well, I'll just go online and go get on Reverb or eBay, make sure it doesn't have the collar, and then I would try to get them to, if they can, take the tuner apart, and or just, sometimes it's just a crapshoot. A lot of guys, if the tuner's together, a lot of guys are not going to want to take it apart. So sometimes you just have to do a crapshoot. I would try to find a whole set of them. You can find full sets for sometimes $150, but sometimes they're more like $300. So I would just be watching Reverb and eBay if you have one of these guitars, and you can find them. And hopefully in that set you'll be able to find a couple that are good, or you can cobble together. You can take them apart and you can clean them with naphtha and lighter fluid, and then you can put them back together, and you can use white lithium grease, and you can get them back together and working well. So there are your options. So it's all because 20 years ago I bought the wrong kind of tuner for a 68 Paisley. So I think that's all you need to know. And I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and our really crazy deep dive rabbit trail on Fender F tuners. Thanks. Bye-bye.